Hello. Um, as I indicated, let me see if I can move this around a little bit. Uh, Maybe that'll work. We'll see. As I indicated, I want you all to study proteins mostly on your own. I'm going to spend a little bit of time in class for two reasons. Number one is there is a few points I want to make that maybe are not in this article or in this YouTube video, and also I want to make sure that you guys have kept up a little bit. And then we'll have a quiz on this probably sometime right after break, maybe the Wednesday after the break. But let's go through this a little bit. Let me see if I can move this. Here we go. All right, so this is basic. I'm just going to kind of point out some things here in this document. You should have a copy of this document on Blackboard, and I am making hard copies that I'll be passing out on Monday. The first section is just an example of some proteins. A lot of them you're familiar with, and some you aren't, but I want you to kind of know these proteins so that when I'm talking about proteins, you'll have a sense of what some of these things are. If I use something as an example, you'll know what it is. I think in terms of nutrition, lactase you already know about, and lactase is a protein and it's an enzyme. It speeds up a chemical reaction. Let's see, glucagon you've heard of certainly. Hemoglobin you should know about. Collagen, albumin or egg white protein, which you can denature just by you heat it up and it goes from like a clear viscous material to a white solid material. Casein and opsin. This is something we'll study when we get into vitamin A. This is a protein that helps in vision. It works along with vitamin A to help in vision. Structure of a protein. Proteins, like a lot of the other things we studied, are made up of monomers, individual units that are strung together into polymers, monomers and polymers. The monomer of a protein is the amino acid. And structurally, it's basically made up of a central carbon with that COOH group, C double bond O, OH, the carboxyl group or the acid group attached. There's an NH2 group attached, an amino group. Okay, so we have an amino group in NH2, a carboxylic acid group. Okay, and then we have another group here that's just called a side group. Sometimes it's called an R group or a side group. It can be one of 20 different things. Okay, it might just be a simple carbon with a couple of hydrogens attached. It might be a ring-like structure. It might be several carbons with hydrogens attached. It can be 20 different things. Therefore, there's 20 different amino acids that can be strung together in all sorts of combinations. But the word amino acid comes from there's an amino group and there's an acid group, amino acid. So this group here can change, and I think we're going to see that here in a second. Yeah, here's some 4 different amino acids. You can see they all have the central carbon, the carboxylic acid or the acid group, the NH2 or the amino group. Oh, and I didn't point out they also have a hydrogen attached here. So you got a carbon, acid group, nitrogen group, the amino group right here, the NH2, and then you have the hydrogen right here. And then here's a very, very simple amino acid. The side group is just a hydrogen atom, and it's the amino acid glycine. In this one, the side group is just a carbon with 3 hydrogens attached. This is the amino acid alanine. This one here is a little bit more complicated. It's a carbon, 1 carbon, 2 carbons with the acid group and some hydrogens. This is the amino acid aspartic acid. And then this is phenylalanine. This is the one we talked about it's in aspartame. But in every case, we have the central carbon, carboxylic acid, the NH2 group, the hydrogen, and then we have the side group. Okay. Now, there's 20 different amino acids in the body that make up all those different proteins that I've shown you earlier. Most of them your body can make. You eat what you want, and your body jiggles things around. Your liver converts things from one thing to another, takes things apart, puts them back together, and you wind up with amino acids. So most of them your body can make, but there's 9 of them that are called essential, which means that you have to eat them in your diet. You have to get them from your diet. Your body can't make them. If you don't get them in your diet, your body will not be as healthy, certainly, as it should be. Let's see. Okay. These 20 amino acids can combine in different ways to form thousands of different proteins. I mean, just think about it. If they were like 20 letters of the alphabet, how many different ways can you put together 20 letters of the alphabet? Lots of different ways. Well, just think of the same thing with the amino acids. 20 different amino acids. You can put them together in lots of different ways, so you can wind up with lots of different proteins, from hemoglobin to lactase to collagen, all sorts of different amino acids can be, or all sorts of different proteins can form from the 20 amino acids. Each protein molecule, which is a string of amino acids, has a certain shape to it. And if you heat it high enough, add acid to it, and there's a few other things that you can do, you essentially denature the protein molecule. You have this protein molecule made of amino acids. This protein molecule has a very specific shape. You change that shape somehow, you denatured that shape, and then that protein won't work the way it's supposed to. This is called denaturization. You can do it with heat, acid, some other things. For example, this is the classic example. You have egg white. Okay, egg white serves its purpose in the egg. Okay, it's a protein. It's called albumin. That's the fancier name for it. If you heat it, you denature it. And you change it from that viscous, liquid, clear stuff into a white, solid stuff that we like to eat. It would not be good for the the chicken egg for it to be in that form, but it's good for us. So we've denatured it and made it good for us, but the original form is this viscous, clear solution. Casein, which is a protein in milk, is the same thing. Casein has a function in milk. Animals, baby animals, drink milk. There's a certain function for the casein protein, but you can denature it by adding acid and enzymes and heat, and there's all sorts of ways you can denature that casein protein, and it curdles up. And if you filter it out, that curdled up stuff, you get cheese. You can make cheese out of it. That's denaturization. You denature the shape of that protein, casein. Okay. The sequence of amino acids is determined by your genes. You have all these different proteins in your body made up of strings of amino acids in specific sequences. Okay, it's determined by your genes. And the way it works is this. You have your genes, which are in the nucleus of your cells in your body. That's where the genes are. The genes are made of DNA. Okay, genes and DNA. This is the chemical that makes up the genes. This DNA makes a compound called RNA, ribonucleic acid. Okay, this RNA leaves the nucleus and goes out into what's called the cytoplasm of the cell. You have the nucleus and the cytoplasm. The nucleus has the genes and it has the DNA in it. DNA makes RNA, and RNA is basically a code. It's a molecule, but it's a code. The RNA leaves the nucleus, goes out into the cytoplasm, and goes over to something called ribosomes, which are tiny little particles that are in the cytoplasm. They're essentially the protein factories in the cytoplasm. Now, since the RNA has a code on it, it goes over to the ribosomes, and between the code that's on the RNA and the ribosomes, the protein factories, the amino acids that are floating around in the cytoplasm. There's an amino acid pool. There's all these different amino acids floating around in the cytoplasm. What will happen is those amino acids will be put together in specific ways to form proteins. Okay? They'll be put together in a way that conforms to the code that's on the RNA, which is made of DNA, which goes back to the genes. So say you have 20,000 genes in your body, theoretically your body can make 20,000 different kinds of proteins, from hemoglobin to collagen to whatever. So I kind of want you to know the sequence of this, that the proteins in your body, the thousands of proteins in your body, are made in these protein factories, but it all goes back to the genes. Okay? The genes determine the proteins in your body. Okay. You can condense, this is just showing you a condensation reaction. We're condensing the amino acid alanine and the amino acid glycine into a dipeptide, okay? We're taking two amino acids and we're sticking them together to form a dipeptide. And like all other condensation reactions we've studied, we have we can take an OH alpha here and an H alpha here to form a water molecule. And then we form a bond between the alanine and the glycine. And this is the bond here. It's called a peptide bond. Okay, so sometimes proteins, you'll hear the word peptides used, polypeptides. Okay, so and then this just goes on and on and on, a big long string of these things condensed together to form whatever protein your body wants or needs. There's high quality proteins and low quality, and this refers to the proteins that you eat. High quality proteins are ones that have basically all of the 9 essential amino acids in them. All the amino acids that your body can't make, okay, the essential amino acids, are found in high quality protein foods. Eggs and milk and steak are very high quality protein foods. They have all the essential amino acids. And then some things are lower quality. Some of the things like vegetables. Vegetables are good for you, but the protein quality isn't necessarily high. It may not contain all of the 9 essential amino acids. It might be missing 1, might be missing 2. Now, what's example, and I don't know whether you've ever heard about this, it's basically a form of, well, we'll get to complementary proteins in a second. Let's see what I have here. Many plant proteins are lower quality. For example, wheat and rice proteins. Wheat protein and rice proteins are missing the essential amino acid called lysine. Lysine is an amino acid. It's essential. You have to eat it in your diet. Beans have proteins in them, and they're lacking the essential amino acid called methionine. So they don't have all 9 essential amino acids. The wheat and rice and the beans are all lacking 1 essential amino acid. Okay. Complementary proteins. These are lower quality proteins combined in a meal to provide adequate levels of the essential amino acids. For example, rice is missing the essential amino acid lysine. Beans are missing the essential amino acid methionine. But if you eat them together, beans and rice, okay, they both complement each other. Okay, the rice, which is missing lysine, gets, well, the meal of beans and rice, you have rice in it, which is missing lysine. Well, the beans have lysine in it. beans, which are missing methionine, well, the rice has methionine in it. So if you eat the two together, you're getting your lysine and your methionine, which are your essential amino acids. That's called complementary eating, and a lot of people, especially vegetarians, have to do that. Since a lot of vegetables are slightly lower in quality, you have to mix some foods together to make sure that they complement each other in terms of essential amino acids. Let's go into digestion and absorption. Mouth, there really isn't much digestion of proteins. Stomach, there's a little bit. You have the acid that's in the stomach that will denature the proteins and make them more digestible. And then you have an enzyme in there that we didn't talk about later, and your book doesn't mention it in chapter 3, but it's the enzyme pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme that can break down, it can break the bonds between the amino acids that are in the protein. Okay, it can break the bonds that are in the amino acids that connect the amino acids together. The peptide bonds can be broken by this enzyme called pepsin. Small intestine, well, this is where most of the digestion occurs in the duodenum. You have a lot of proteases and some specific names of some proteases that are, proteases is a group of enzymes that break down proteins. But there's some specific ones called trypsin and chymotrypsin that are specific for breaking down proteins. So we have the general group, the proteases, but a lot of times you'll see things, you'll see words like trypsin and chymotrypsin, which are proteases. They are proteases, very specific to breaking down proteins. The resulting amino acids are absorbed into the villi and then into the blood. Then they travel to the liver through the hepatic portal vein, and the liver can do lots of things to these amino acids that you've eaten. We've talked about gluconeogenesis before. If you eat way too many proteins, it's possible that these proteins can be converted into fats and stored as fat. The enzymes that break down the proteins come from the pancreas, and the villi actually make some proteins or make some proteases also. So we have digestion of the proteins by proteases such as trypsin and chymotrypsin. They're absorbed into the villi, go into the bloodstream, then through the hepatic portal vein to the liver, and the liver can do all kinds of crazy things. The enzymes from the pancreas are released under the direction of the hormone CCK, cholecystokinin, when food enters the intestine. So if you have food that enters the intestine and it's got protein in it, well, the small intestine is going to make this hormone CCK, cholecystokinin, and that CCK is going to trigger the pancreas to release protease enzymes. Let's go into the functional proteins. Well, we all know there's 4 kilocalories per gram worth of energy in those bonds. They're building block molecules for many body structures. There's the protein collagen as part of the structure of the skin and your bones. There's the proteins actin and myosin that make up your muscle tissue. There's all sorts of different structural things in your body that are made of proteins. Proteins can function as enzymes, which speed up chemical reactions. We have the proteases, the carbohydrases, and the lipases, of which some of these get more specific. We just talked about chymotrypsin and trypsin. They speed up chemical reactions. They work by the lock and key mechanism, and I will show you that in class, the lock and key. Proteins can make up some hormones, such as insulin and glucagon. Both of these things are proteins. They regulate fluid balance in the body. Alterations in handling of protein by the body can cause edema. If your body doesn't quite handle the proteins the way it's supposed to, it can change the fluid balance in your body, and you can get swelling of body tissues. And this swelling of body tissues is called edema. This is, we'll look at some pictures maybe in class of some cases of poor handling of protein that causes swelling of body tissues. Even in people that, especially in some people that don't get enough food, people that are starving can wind up with big bloated bellies and things like that because the water balance in their body is not right and they have edema or swelling in certain parts of their body. Proteins help control the pH of the blood and keep it within the range of 7.35 to 7.45. Proteins help transport molecules through cell membranes. Remember, every cell has a membrane around it and things have to get in and out. And proteins can help in that by transporting things from outside the cell to the inside of the cell. Antibodies are proteins. The protein fibrin in a cut on your body helps trap blood and form a clot. It forms a network. So fibrin's a good one to know. I forgot that one up there in that paragraph 1. When you cut yourself, it bleeds for a while and then it stops. Well, one of the reasons it stops bleeding is there's a protein called fibrin that forms this meshwork that traps blood cells, and then they all kind of clot together. And then the protein opsin combines with vitamin A in the eye to help vision. So there's lots of different things that proteins can do. 4 kilocalories per gram, give you energy. Building blocks for many structures. For example, actin and myosin that make up are proteins that make up muscle. A lot of them are enzymes. Some of them are hormones. They regulate fluid balance in the body. And we talked about the word edema. They help control the pH of the blood and keep it within an appropriate range. They can transport things in and out of the cell, function as antibodies. Talked a little bit about fibrin and blood clots. And I talked a little bit about the protein opsin and vitamin A and how it helps in vision. Deamination. Remember, the amino acids have a, an amino group. Okay, there's an amino group right there. If I deaminate this amino acid, that means I've taken off the nitrogen and the 2 hydrogens. So here's an amino acid. If I deaminate it, I've taken off the nitrogen and the hydrogens. And sometimes the body does that. For example, if I wanted to convert this amino acid into something else, maybe I want to eventually convert it into glucose. Well, one of the first things the body's going to have to do is going to have to say, okay, this amino acid here, glycine, I want to make glucose out of it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deaminate it. It's going to take off this NH2. And then it's going to do a couple other things, and it will convert it into glucose. Or maybe it will convert it into fatty acids, which will eventually get converted into fats and stored in your body. So let's go back down here. Deamination. Removal of the NH2 group. That's done a lot of times if you want to. For example, let's say you have a lot of the amino acid glycine in your body and you want to convert it to another amino acid. Sometimes the amino acid glycine might be, well, I've made a slight mistake here. Say you have the amino acid glycine in your body and your body wants to, but it doesn't have enough glycine. Okay, this is where I'm going on this. It doesn't have enough glycine. Your body needs more glycine, amino acid glycine. It can do a strange thing. It can deaminate another amino acid like alanine. Okay, then it can take that NH2 and put it on another molecule that doesn't have an amino group on it and convert that other molecule into glycine, the amino acid that your body needs. So your body doesn't have enough glycine. It needs more glycine. It can go to another amino acid that it has plenty of, deaminate that amino acid, take that NH2 group and put it on some other molecule of your body, okay, and convert it into the amino acid glycine. The body does that all the time, most of the time in the liver. Now, sometimes your body just takes the NH2 group off and doesn't really have anything to do with it. And it's got to get rid of it because that NH2 group forms NH3. The NH2 group, the amino group that comes off the amino acid, forms NH3, which is ammonia. And that's toxic. So sometimes when you deaminate, because there's too much protein and amino acids in your body says, I got to get rid of this stuff. So one of the first things it does is it deaminates it, okay? And it takes off the amino group, which gets converted into ammonia, which is toxic. Now it's got to get rid of the ammonia, the NH3. It does that by combining it with CO2, carbon dioxide, okay? The gas carbon dioxide, you've all heard of that. You breathe it out, okay? It combines it with CO2 and forms urea, which is less toxic. This happens in the liver. Then the liver releases the urea into the blood, and then the kidneys filter the urea out of the blood, and the urea is then excreted in the urine. So make sure you got a sense of how, what deamination can do. It's useful for the rearrangement of molecules. It's useful for converting something that's not an amino acid into an amino acid, except for the essentials. Sometimes the body just, there's too many amino acids in there, just wants to get rid of some of that stuff. And it deaminates the amino acids, forms ammonia, which is toxic, combines the ammonia with CO2, carbon dioxide, to form urea, which is less toxic. And this happens in the liver, and the liver releases the urea into the blood. The blood goes to the kidneys. The kidneys filter out the urea, and the urea is excreted in your urine. Sometimes your urine has like an ammonia type of a smell, especially if it's sitting for a while. It might develop like an ammonia type of a smell, and that's because the urea in your urine, okay, the urea in your urine, if the urine sits around for a while, for whatever reason, if the urine sits around, the urea is very much related to ammonia. So you can get an ammonia type of a smell from it. Protein and health. If your body needs an essential amino acid to build a protein, for example, hemoglobin protein, and you do not have that essential amino acid in your diet, your body will not be able to make the protein hemoglobin. Hemoglobin production will stop or slow down. In other words, the essentials you have to get in your diet, and if you don't get them, there might be certain proteins that won't be made in the proper amounts in your body. Okay, if it's a non-essential amino acid, your body essentially can jiggle some things around, maybe take an amino group off of one thing and put it on something that doesn't have an amino group and convert it into the non-essential amino acid, which will then get converted into the protein. Protein deficiency can result in slowed growth, impaired brain and kidney function, and poor immunity. Heart disease. Proteins themselves don't seem to increase the rate of CHD, coronary heart disease, CHV, coronary heart disease, should be CVD, coronary vascular disease. This should be CVD, coronary vascular disease. CHD is coronary heart disease. CVD is coronary vascular disease. Proteins themselves don't seem to cause problems with the heart or the vascular system, the arteries and veins and those kind of things. However, animal proteins are high in fat. In other words, you eat a steak. Well, the proteins in the steak may not cause any kind of problems with heart disease, but typically the proteins in the steak are associated with high levels of fat. So while the protein isn't causing you a problem, the idea that that food that you're eating is high in fat may cause heart disease. So keep that in mind. Proteins themselves seem to be not related to heart disease, but the fat that goes along with them may. Cancer, proteins do not increase the risk for cancer. However, intake of red and processed meats, which are high in protein but also high in fats, does increase the risk of cancer. In other words, here we're talking about cancer. Proteins don't seem to increase the risk of cancer, but since proteins usually come along with fats, like in a steak and processed meats, okay, the fats are related to potential kinds of cancer. And some protein foods like fish, which do have a lot of protein in them, uh, don't really have an awful lot of fat. And the fat they do have is basically some of those omega-3s that we talked about that are relatively good for you. Okay. Bone loss. There may be some increases in bone calcium with high protein diets. There may be some increase in bone calcium with high protein diets. That doesn't make sense. And I'm going to have to double check that. There may be some increase in bone calcium with high protein diets. It seems to me that there may be some increase in bone calcium loss with high protein diets. There may be some increase in bone calcium loss with high protein diets. I'll put that up on the board too when we talk about proteins, and then you can just kind of write it into the document. Weight control. High protein in foods may help you feel full. Satiety. We talked about satiety. Proteins evidently increase satiety, the feeling of fullness, so you won't eat as much. Kidney disease. Very high protein foods increase the work of the kidneys. Remember, now they got to get rid of that urea from the deamination that we talked about. And your body's got to get rid of all that urea, and that happens in the kidneys, the liver, and also the kidneys, and that can put a stress on your kidney, and it can actually cause some kidney problems with high protein diets. I'm going to talk about that too, because there was an interesting case of a bodybuilder who had a problem with a high protein diet and actually died from it. Protein needs. Remember our 55-30-15 rule. 55 carbs, 30 fat, 15 protein. That's just a general guideline. 50% of the kilocalories in your body should be come from proteins. However, there's another way to do it that most people use, and that's this. For every kilogram of your body weight, you need 0.8 grams of protein. This is kind of like a rule of thumb that a lot of people use. For every kilogram of your body weight, you need 0.8 grams of protein. So to calculate out how much protein you basically need, you need to take your body weight in kilograms, and essentially you wouldn't have to, but you could change it to pounds. Okay, so let's look at some examples here, and I'm going to change this kilograms to pounds because that's what your book does. You don't have to. I typically wouldn't, but I'm going to do the way your book does it. Okay, to change your body weight in pounds to kilograms divided by 2.2. Got it. Okay. I see what we got here. I haven't looked at this document for a while. Generally, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. You got to change pounds to kilograms to use this formula. Okay? You got to change pounds to kilograms to use this formula. So to change your body weight in pounds to kilograms, you divide by 2.2. Okay? You take your pounds of body weight, divide it by 2.2 to change it to kilograms, then multiply by 0.8. Okay? Sorry if I confused you, but follow what I'm saying now, and I'll do one of these problems on the board in class. So, change your body weight in pounds to kilograms by dividing by 2.2. That's the factor. Then multiply by 0.8. For example, a 180-pound man would need about 65 grams of protein per day. Okay? Where do you get that? 180 pounds divided by 2.2. Okay? That converts the pounds into kilograms times 0.8, and you come up with 65.45. Note there's 2.2 pounds per kilogram in that's the factor that we're using. Every kilogram is 2.2 pounds. And then I think here's another example here. How many grams of protein would be required for a 220-pound man per day? Well, the man weighs 220 pounds. We got to divide it by 2.2 to change it to kilograms, which is 100 kilograms. And then we take the 100 kilograms and we multiply it by 0.8, and we get 80 grams of protein is what this person would need. That's a decent amount of protein. The daily value for proteins that they use on food labels is 50 grams. 50 grams would be 100% of the daily value on a food label. So look at how this little formula works, and make sure that you can do one of these formulas. I will probably put one up on the board when I spend a short period of time talking about proteins in class. The USDA food pattern suggests 5.5 ounces of protein per day. Meats, poultry, fish are high in protein, and you know that. The good thing about fish is a lot of times the fat that's associated with the protein is omega-3s. Select lean meats and poultry. Trim the fat. Remove the skin. These are all good things to do when you're eating meats and like chicken and stuff like that. Theoretically, you're supposed to take the skin off. Skin's got a lot of fat in it. I don't necessarily do it because I just love the skin. So select a mix of meat, poultry, seafood, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Kind of balance out the meaty things with the vegetable things. Milk and milk products are high in protein, so theoretically you should be drinking low-fat milk. Maybe drink 1% milk, 2% milk, rather than 4% milk, 4% fat in the milk. Fruits, vegetables, and grains contain only a little bit of protein. Legumes have a lot of like bean type things have a lot of protein in them. So just kind of go through these things here a little bit and be a little bit familiar with the foods that are higher in proteins and some of the foods that are lower in proteins. And the miscellaneous thing I have down here is this. A lot of people think that if you eat protein, you will build muscle, because proteins are amino acids, made of amino acids, and your body needs those amino acids to make actin and myosin, the proteins that are in your muscles, in your biceps and your triceps. Actin and myosin are the proteins that are there. They are made of amino acids, and you get those amino acids from the food you eat and from your body jiggling some. Let me get back into this. And from your body, making amino acids. But what I want you to realize is eating high protein foods doesn't make muscle. You have to exercise. The only way that protein food that you eat will become muscle is exercising. Just eating steak after steak after steak every day is not going to make you muscular. You got to exercise. The two go together if you want to build muscle. Or, I put this down here just so that you know it. You can build muscle illegally by taking steroids. Okay. And some people have gotten caught doing that. Some bodybuilders have gotten caught doing that. if you eat more protein than you need, a lot of it can be converted into, some can be converted into sugar and glycogen, and a lot of it can be converted into fat. So that's pretty much it. That was 40 minutes. That was a little bit longer than I really wanted to go. But so when you're watching this, just split it up into two 20-minute little things here and read along with the document that I'm going to give you a hard copy of. And that'll give you a good sense of what's in the chapter on proteins. And there'll be a couple little things I wanted to add, and I'll do that in class. Um, I'm sitting here doing this, and I know I made a lot of errors, but it's Friday night, and I'm half asleep, and so I'm a little bit tongue tied, and I said some things that were a little that I had to correct, but it's all good. Uh, and the things that I said that I think might be a little bit confusing, I will bring up in class. We'll spend a little bit of time in class on proteins, and that's it.